much for being on time. Incredibly helpful. I'm Jo Banks, as you've probably guessed. And what I just want to do before I get into the content is just give you a bit of a background about me. I'm noticing I can see your names down the side. I know a couple of you know me. Some of you are even coached by me, which is fabulous. It's nice to see you on here. So you know what I do and you know my background. But for those of you who don't, I was in human resources for 20 years, but actually really did not like HR. I spent a lot of my time fighting with unions, and it was quite aggressive businesses that I worked within. And I got to that senior level with all the bells and whistles, and then decided on a big birthday, you know what, don't want to do this anymore. So I took the very big, bold decision to resign and set up my own business. I did loads of retrainings. I've always been fascinated in the way the brain works, how we think, and how that influences how we behave. So I went off and did oodles of retraining. I did my exec coaching, as you would expect. I did NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I did CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and everything in between. So I'm an NLP master practitioner. If you haven't heard of NLP, it's all around how we think, the pictures we create, and how it affects our bodies and how it affects our behavior. That fits very well with cognitive behavioral therapy. And what I wanted to do was bring those two things together, but in a work environment. As I say, I worked in very aggressive, very hard-nosed, very commercial environments. And I was fascinated about how you could use those tools and techniques to work for you in a business scenario. So started up my own business, just doing the coaching, just with the exec coaching. And because it was going so well, I was making fundamental changes with people, not just helping them get from A to B, but really working with them around their processes, their thinking, their behaviors. They started saying, can you do this stuff for my team? So I didn't actually start off wanting to do any of this as a training, but what I did want to do was just do the coaching. But with the feedback being so good, I kind of moved into the training side of things. But when COVID hit, as you can imagine, all of my work was pretty much face to face. I hadn't done any of this malarkey before, but I had to do what we call a reframe, and we're going to talk about reframes when I get into the session fully. Reframes are really powerful because I'll talk about how I was brought up. I was brought up in a very negative household, and my initial programming, and we'll talk about programming, was, oh my God, this is the end of the world. I'm going to end up in a shoebox in the middle of the street. But I took a step back, thought, what are all the tools, techniques, information, what technology do I have to be able to give something back and still be able to keep my business going? Because obviously I get paid by the work I bring in. I don't have a constant employer, as many of you will have. So I had to look for different ways. Took some great tools and techniques from a full day building resilience, a full day emotional intelligence, and a full day coaching program. Took the specific tools out of that and put it into a 2-hour webinar. And I've literally been delivering that to, it's around 1,500 to 2,000 people. I've lost count now, that I've delivered that to since COVID first hit. It has changed the program slightly over the year as you know, situations have changed. But what I've decided now to do is take some of those top tools from that 2-hour webinar that a lot of my clients have been buying and coming back for multiple courses, and give you just a bite-size taster session, if you like, of the things that I cover off in that wider webinar. So as I say, it's only, by the time I've kind of gone through everything, it'd be a half an hour, 35 minutes worth of content. So it's only a tiny little bit really of the fuller program. So I obviously do this kind of webinar, I do remote working webinars, I do team building, all kinds of different things, but typically in a corporate environment. But a couple of clients have said, you know what, can you not let this stuff out for people who are maybe their businesses won't pay for it, or they, you know, they might benefit of your wisdom, because I've been doing this 12 years now. So it's 12 years since I set up my own business, 12 years coaching, training, delivering this stuff. I am an avid learner. So I'm always listening to podcasts, going on courses, doing my own learning. And what I can do then is translate it in and pass it out to my clients. So the stuff that I'm giving you today, packed full of top tips and advice that I know absolutely work, because they've been tried and tested with thousands of people. I've coached probably 1,500 people on a one-to-one. I've had over 10,000 people through my workshops over the past 12 years. So one thing I really do know, coupled with my 20 years in HR, is people, how they tick, how to get people motivated, how to get people to think differently. Let's have a look at what we're going to cover. First of all, we're going to look at the stress response. So what happens to our bodies when we experience stress, and why we experience stress? Because a lot of people don't even realize why we experience stress the way we do. And I'll also talk about the long-term negative effects of stress and how it affects our bodies. Then we're going to talk about our thoughts. Now, a lot of people think I've got that saying, thoughts become things, from that wonderful lady who created The Secret. I haven't. This was around a lot longer than that lady, before that lady cleverly pulled everything together in The Secret. If you haven't read The Secret, really good book. But we're going to look at our thoughts, where our thoughts come from, how to change the ones that aren't serving us. So if you're a worrier, if you panic, if you worry about things, that's a great one for you. Emotion control, we're going to look at then how to control our emotions in a better way, because I know a lot of people are feeling a lot of overwhelm at the moment and anxiety. So how do we use reframing to control our emotions? Finally, we're going to look at well-being, and there are lots of top tips in there, really easy, simple to use tools and techniques. So we'll look at diet, sleep patterns, but what I won't do is patronize you and tell you what you should be eating. But what I will do is give you some information around why you might be comfort eating, why you might be binge eating, how we're not drinking enough water, and on the sleep side of things, why you might not be able to fall asleep, why you might be making up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which I know is really, really common. So that's what we're going to be covering off this morning. So without further ado, let me get into it. So looking at the stress response first. Now, what causes stress and anxiety? When I was pulling this webinar together, I took this slide from my full day building resilience course that I used to run before the pandemic with managers, typically managers, to be honest. And when I was writing this webinar, I thought, doesn't this just fit perfectly? Typically, even without the pandemic, relentless change, changing roles, speed of change, technology, relationships, all of those things individually would cause us to feel stressed and anxious. But we've got literally all of them all together with the pandemic. So it's no wonder that a lot of us are feeling stressed, anxious, and in overwhelm. Now, as humans, one of the things we really need is certainty. It's built into our DNA. And we're going to talk quite a lot about our caveman brain today and how we think we're very complex, but actually we're not. And one of the most fundamental needs for our survival is to feel certain. When we feel uncertain, we feel out of control. When we feel out of control, it causes stress, anxiety, worry, overwhelm, all of those negative feelings. So what I want to do today is give you some real, tangible, easy to use tools and techniques to allow you to take some of that control back. It's about controlling what you can control. So let's have a little look. First of all, I think for the background, we really need to talk about the stress response. When we feel stressed, it affects our biochemistry. our nervous system perceives a threat, and that word is really important, perceives a threat and prepares. So what I mean by that is, this is really quite important. Our minds cannot tell the difference between a perceived threat and a real physical threat. So a real physical threat could be walking down the road on a dark night and you hear footsteps behind you. That would trigger the stress response. Now, that would be an absolutely normal, needed response to those footsteps behind you. However, because our brains cannot tell the difference between that real life physical threat and what we imagine, we trigger off the same response. So if you're worrying, panicking, in overwhelm, you keep triggering that stress response exactly the same way as you would if you were in real physical danger. So if you are panicking about the kids homeschooling, if you are panicking about bills, if you are panicking about the amount of workload you've got on and how you're going to get through everything, if you're worrying about projecting into the future, worrying about what might happen, if you're listening too much to the news, every time you start to feel stressed and anxious, you are triggering exactly the same stress response as you would if you're walking down the road on a dark night and heard footsteps. So worrying, overthinking, panicking, all of those things induce this stress response. So what is it? Well, basically, chemicals, as soon as we experience this stress and we get this, you'll know, you all know what this feels like. If somebody cuts you up when you're in the car, that triggers the stress response. If somebody bumps into you in the street, that triggers the stress response. They're actually potential physical threats. But obviously, the worrisome thoughts, the anxiety and the stress, they produce the same results. So they shoot out whenever you're worrying, stressing, you get that shot of adrenaline and cortisol. That induces your fight, flight, freeze. Now, you've all heard of fight, flight, freeze, but not a lot of people are putting two and two together when it comes to our stress response and how we respond to stress. So it triggers that fight, flight, freeze response. It's DNA based, goes back to our caveman times. Now, adrenaline and cortisol are designed to give us a quick, short burst of strength and energy to either run away from the saber-toothed tiger, fight it, or freeze and hide until the danger's gone. Now, the problem is, with all the stress and anxiety we've got coming at us at the moment, we can't run away. We definitely can't fight because that's socially unacceptable. And so we freeze and we end up kind of in a frozen state. Now, what happens is over time, those chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol, build up in your bloodstream. They build up, and over a longer time, they suppress the immune system. Now, we already know, and I'm not trying to scare anybody here, but we already know that the long-term effects of stress can be heart disease, diabetes, mental health issues. So if we can start to take control of this stress response, lowering those chemicals, not having them bouncing around our bodies, that stands to reason that we're going to feel better and more in control. So how do we do that? Quickest way is nothing more complicated than a 15-minute walk. Now, this is not just Joe Banks thinking this is a good idea. This is Harvard, Stanford, MIT have produced loads and loads and loads of science-backed research on this topic. There's a guy called Andrew Huberman, who is a neuroscientist who I am an avid follower of. He speaks very highly of this 15-minute walk. And so that it's really backed in science. It's not just kind of, it sounds like a good idea. So if you're already feeling stressed, and you know the feeling, some people feel it in the stomach, it's like those butterflies, because actually the feeling of being very anxious and the feeling of being very excited, actually feel the same. It's just the thoughts that are different. They actually feel the same in the body. It's just our thoughts around the topic are different. So if you feel that butterflies, the anxiety in your stomach, or you feel that tightness in your chest, some people feel it in their heads. Some people just feel overwhelmed and not able to focus anymore. The quickest way you can reduce that is to go for a 15-minute walk. First of all, it burns off the adrenaline and the cortisol. Secondly, it releases dopamine. Dopamine makes it's a reward chemical, by the way, so that actually makes you feel good. Endorphins, which are a painkiller. Serotonin also makes you feel good. And not only that, serotonin regulates what we call our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle. So not only do we burn off these nasties, but we actually release dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. If you go with somebody else, if you go for your walk with somebody else, you'll also release oxytocin. Bit of a no-brainer, really. And it only needs to be 15 minutes. You have to get your heart rate up. So you have to, get a bit of a wiggle on. But actually, it burns off those chemicals, releases these chemicals. Now, a lot of us, especially now because we're not getting outside, we aren't getting the serotonin we need for a good night's sleep. Serotonin regulates our sleep. If we don't get enough, it could be why you're having trouble sleeping. So we are not designed to be in boxes. And, it's only really for the last 100 years or even the last 50 years, we've spent so much time indoors. Before that, a lot of people worked outside. We walked to places. We didn't just get in the car. And now it's even worse because a lot of us are in lockdown. We're not going out. We're not driving to work. And so we aren't getting that serotonin that we need. Now, we need that serotonin to come into the back of our eyes because our caveman ancestors, and we haven't developed as much as we think we have, we're still very much got that caveman brain, would wake up with the sun and the light would shine in the back of their eyes. Then they would go to sleep, go to bed when the sun went down and the light shone in at a different angle. So it's really important that you get that serotonin release from the daylight because it regulates your sleep cycle. So if you've got really icky sleep, that's a technical term, you've got icky sleep patterns, could be that you're not getting enough serotonin. Now, here's the other thing, and this is fairly recent research, but it absolutely pans out, that when we're feeling really stressed, and you'll know this if you found yourself in overwhelm, where you just get to the point where you just can't deal with anymore. A lot of my clients will say it's like looking at the world through blinkers or through a tunnel or feeling like a lid has been put on the world. And that's because what your brain is designed to do is focus you on that one big immediate threat. And that's why we struggle with so many things going on at one time. What it does is it's like getting your phone in portrait mode. It literally narrows your view. So if we go outside and walk, again, a caveman thing, our view goes from portrait to landscape because we have to be aware of threats coming from all around us. So it's a really instant way of feeling, if you're feeling overwhelmed, of widening that view and giving you capacity to be able to deal with more. So, when you say to yourself, oh, I'm way too busy to go for a walk, you're the type of person that needs that walk. You need to get yourself out. If you go out and take that 15 minutes, I'm trying to make it as easy for you as possible. Obviously, if you can do more, 15-minute walk, run, cycle ride, whichever works for you, then that's going to make a huge difference to your immediate stress levels. So get that walk in your diary, schedule it in as you would any other important meeting because it's absolutely critical, especially if you're experiencing overwhelm. The second way is to deal with the emotions and deal with the stress before it even gets to critical mass point. So that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this session. So let's have a little look at our thoughts. We have all been programmed, whether you realize it or not, as children. And this is really important for you guys who have kids, especially under the age of 7. Really important. We learn our reactions and our thinking styles in 2 ways. First of all, from our parents and primary caregivers. So think about it. If you're afraid of spiders, let me give you this example. If you're afraid of spiders, I will guarantee you that as a child, you will have seen somebody go, ah, spider. Your little brain will go, that's interesting. So when I see one of those things crawling up the wall, my reaction has to be, ah, spider. Okay. All done in the subconscious. So we learn our physical reactions to things, but we also learn our thinking styles as well from our parents. So if you're a worrier, I will guarantee that one or both of your parents were worriers. If you're an overthinker, same thing. If you are super positive, same thing. If you are super negative, same thing. You will have learned that from your parents. If you have strong political views, strong racial views, strong religion views, strong views on anything, I will pretty much guarantee you've picked them up from your parents. Now, I was brought up in the most negative household, and bearing in mind how many people I've worked with over the years, as I say, well over 10,000, I have never ever come across people as negative as my parents. And it was only when I started to learn all of this that I understood that I could change my programming, because up until the age of 30 I was incredibly negative. And if you've spent any time with me at all, you'll know that the way I'm being on this webinar is no different than how I am in real life. This is me, this is how I am, and I am incredibly positive, but I have now trained myself to be that way. But I was very programmed for negativity and worry and upset. So that's the first way we learn our reactions and our thinking style. So if you say to your kids, don't do as I do as I say, good luck with that, because that doesn't work. Secondly, we learn it by trial and error. So we try a behavior and we either like the result or we don't. So I often work with, one of the big things that I work with is execs who struggle with public speaking. Typically, they've learned, it's a learned behavior to panic about public speaking. They've typically learned it as a child. Usually, it could have been from a primary caregiver. Somebody could have told them that they're rubbish at it. So they've taken that on board and told themselves a story that they're rubbish at it. But it could have also been that they had a go at it. They maybe got laughed at, or they stumbled across their words, or it felt really uncomfortable. And so as an adult, they've decided, I can't do that. So we learn a lot up until the age of 7. Our brain functioning changes. I haven't got time to go into that now. But actually then our thoughts, our thinking styles and our behaviours are pretty well fixed by 18 and immovable unconsciously after 25. Any changes we want to make after the age of 25, we have to do consciously, like I've had to do. I've had to unprogram myself. Now, here's the thing, it does shortcut under stress. So I've done 20 plus years worth of work on this. So I call it work, but it's not work. It's a bit like, and I guess I should have said this at the beginning. This is a bit like going to the gym. You've got to do it a little bit every day. You can't just do this stuff once and expect it to work forever. And it's a bit like if a baby falls down when they're learning to walk, you don't leave them down, you let them try again. This is something that needs some continuous work because it can shortcut under stress. So when we went into the first lockdown, I panicked. I went back to my old programming until I took a step back and said, no, I'm not doing that anymore. That's not me anymore. I don't do that panic and that worrying anymore. So a lot of our programming can be inaccurate. Now, I'm not bashing my parents or you as parents here. We all, if we knew better, we'd do better. But what I'm trying to highlight to you is our programming might not be as great as it could be. And the only way now as an adult to unpick it, which it absolutely 100% can be unpicked, but you have to do it consciously. So let's look a bit more at our thoughts. Where do your thoughts come from? I love asking this in a webinar, in a full course when I've got people around me. You, You create your thoughts. They are not plopped in by a superhuman being. I think that's one of my favorite sayings. You create your thoughts. So let's look at them in a bit more detail. We have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. And if you're an overthinker, that can go up to as much as 75,000. Between 85 and 95% of our thoughts every day are the same as the day before. So only between 5 and 15% of our thoughts are new every day. Our thoughts, however, are not reality. We distort, generalize, and delete things to fit in with our view of the world. We have a very set, fixed view of the world: positive, negative, lucky, unlucky, victim, owner. We have all of these filters that we push things through, and we try to fit whatever happens into those boxes where we've kind of placed ourselves. So our thoughts are not necessarily reality. It depends on our programming. We also have habitual thoughts, automatic thoughts. So that's why we have up to 95, the same as the day before, because we create these strong neural pathways in the brain. We create them for two different things: for real life action. So when we do something for the first time, we create a neural pathway. When we think something for the first time, we create a neural pathway. So think about getting in a car and learning to drive. First time you get in the car, you have no references for it. You create a very thin neural pathway. The more practice you do, the deeper the neural pathway becomes. And over time, you will move from having to consciously think about driving to getting to somewhere and thinking, how the heck did I get here? That's because with practice, the neural pathways got very, very deep. Your brain does that because it can only really focus wholly on one thing at a time. It can have some peripheral, up to 4 other peripheral things going on, like listening to the radio while you're working. But you can only really focus on one thing at a time. So the brain has got very, very clever at automating processes. So if you think about cleaning your teeth, putting the kettle on, you put the same leg in your trousers every day when you get dressed, because your brain likes to automate things. So we have these habitual thinking patterns because we have these neural pathways for actual physical things that we do, but we have them for our thoughts as well. So when you actually do something for the first time, think something for the first time, you create a neural pathway. The more energy you give that thought, especially if you're starting to feel the emotions with the thought, the deeper that neural pathway will become. So that's how our thoughts and our repetitive actions work. So here's the thing. If you don't like your thoughts, because now we've learned that you create them based on your programming, if you don't like them, you can change them. Now, the hardest part of what I'm going to show you here is remembering to do it. I can give you really quick, easy to use tools and techniques, but they're only going to work if you use them. First of all, if you have a recurring thought, does it have a message? Is there something that you need to do, an action you need to take, but you're putting off? If so, that thought is going to keep coming back until your subconscious is satisfied you've dealt with it. So if you can do something about it, do it straight away. If you can't, plan for it and then let it go. If it isn't something you need to do something about, then these next techniques will work. So here's the thing. We cannot have two thoughts at once, and that's why you're all muted. And I mentioned this at the beginning, because if I have background noise and disruptions and interruptions, seeing people standing up and moving around, that would take my attention away. And I don't have any notes here. That's a blank pad and my mouse. That's all I have in front of me. This is just me talking off the top of my head. Well, obviously I know my content, but I don't have any notes here. So we cannot have two thoughts at once. It's absolutely impossible. You can't do it. So think about when you're having a conversation with a colleague or a friend. You're deep in conversation. Somebody comes and interrupts you. You turn around, you answer them, you turn back and you go, what the heck was I just talking about? That's because your pattern has been interrupted, because we just cannot have two thoughts at once. So we can use that to our advantage. My top tip, and I use this just this morning because we're like giant video recorders. We go around recording what happens in our lives and playing it back and playing it back, and we create neural pathways so we can get to it easy and play it back easy. The thing is, we never play it back quite how it actually happened because we put our perception and all kinds of things into it. So the quickest way, and again, the hardest part is recognizing if you're having a negative thought. The quickest way to change those thoughts is to literally recognize it and say, oh, stop. I'm not doing that right now, and change it to something else. I did that this morning in the shower. I was replaying something that happened a few weeks ago that I could have dealt with better, making myself feel bad because what we think we feel. And then I realized, hang on a minute, that's gone, can't do anything about it. I dealt with it at the time. Why am I trying to make myself feel bad? Ridiculous. Just stop. What else can I think about? These lovely people I've got to help today. Doesn't have to be groundbreaking. You could literally, if you want to change your thoughts, write your name down, pick up the phone, go and walk somewhere. Because literally, just changing your thought to anything, you might want to put a nice picture on your phone to have a look at, or write some things down that make you smile, because it doesn't have to be groundbreaking to break that train of thought. And it's so easy. Get up and move your body. When we move our physiology, we change how we feel. And finally, my favorite one, and those who've done any of my courses before might have heard me do this, it's really horrible, I'm going to sing at you and I really do apologize, but let it go, let it go, let it go. Can you do something about it? Yes, do it. JFDI, just flipping do it. Can you do something about it? Not right now. Plan for it, then let it go. Can you do something about it? No, let it go. It's a choice. Here's the thing, you can't stop these thoughts. I have not yet found a way to stop the negative thoughts coming to you. And trust me, I have researched this. You cannot stop them coming to you, but you can choose what you do with them. You can choose whether you settle with them. You can choose whether you let them affect you. It's a choice. What you think, as soon as you are listen to your inner critic and a cognitive around what you're thinking, you can change it. It's absolutely within your gift to do that. So that's the stress response and thoughts. Let's have a quick look at emotion control. Our perception is everything. A situation is just that, a situation. It is entirely neutral. It's the meaning that we put to something that makes it positive or negative, and we get meaning from those filters, from our programming, from the way we view the world. Now I want to give you this example just to kind of highlight what we've been talking about. A situation occurs, we perceive it to be a certain way based on our filters, and it gives us a thought about what that situation means to us. It then affects our emotions. We feel it in our body, and it affects our behavior. So that's how it works. The situation happens, we push it through our filters, we have a thought, it affects our emotions, we feel it in our body, and it affects our behavior. Now, where does perception come into this? I'll give you an example of job loss. Now, I've helped about, because I do a lot of outplacement as well as the corporate stuff, the coaching and the general training, but I also do a lot of outplacement. I've probably helped about 6,000 people find jobs through my corporate training programs and one-to-ones, so CV writing, interview skills, that kind of thing. And with all of those people, I've only ever seen 3 responses to job loss. First one, oh my God, it's the end of the world. I'm going to end up in a shoebox in the middle of the street. And incidentally, the amount of redundancy pay that somebody's walking away with has no bearing on how they feel. I've had people walking away with 180 grand, being devastated and think they're never going to find a job again, which is absolute nonsense because I've helped every single person I've worked with find a job. So, end of the world, overwhelm, palpitations, stay in bed doing what I call numbing behaviours. So Netflix binging, gaming, anything other than the job hunting activities they should be doing. Next group goes, woohoo! I can go and do that cake making business that I've always wanted to do. This is brilliant. They get excited, butterflies, and they take action. Incidentally, the third group, I said there was 3, just goes, nah, whatever, I'll always be all right. Now that's 3 very, very different reactions to exactly the same situation. And we can choose how we want to react by doing a reframe, because there are always at least 2 ways of looking at every situation. We can consciously choose to see things differently if we want to. And we can do that by asking better questions. Let me come back to that in a second. What I would say is I work with an awful lot of people doing reframes at the moment. A lot of people that I'm seeing everywhere are focusing on everything that they don't have. When we focus on what we don't have, that's what we're going to feel. When you focus on lack, you get more lack. When you focus on abundance, you get more abundance. And so many people are not looking at the things that they do have and being grateful for the things that they do have. They're just focusing on everything that they haven't. Where focus goes, energy flows. So you can always do a reframe, like I did when the pandemic hit. I thought, what can I do? What stuff have I got? So using reframe questions is a great way to do this. What I would suggest that you do is take a screenshot of this. I will send it out for you afterwards. But if you're struggling with a situation, if you're struggling with what's going on with you at the moment, and you can use this for anything, what could be good about this? How can I use this? Who can help me with this? What haven't I tried? How can I make this work? Who do I know who's done this before? Who can help me? What positives can I find in this if I wanted to? It is a choice whether you focus on everything negative you have in your life or whether you reframe and focus on what could be good or what the positives are. It's absolutely within your control. All day long, I'm reframing with clients at the moment and with myself, because I am not a finished article by any stretch of the imagination. But if you use those reframe questions, use them with your kids, use them with your family, use them if you're a manager, great to use with your team, with your colleagues. Absolutely brilliant to help get you out of what we call learned helplessness and into a position of power. Really, really top tip, great tool to use is the reframing. If we had longer, I'd go into that in a lot more detail because it's actually fascinating, but we are where we are. Okay, the new normal. I know a lot of people don't like that saying, however, I'm going to go with it. Whilst we hit the first lockdown, I'm very active. I would go to the gym 6 days a week. Obviously, we had no gym, so I had to do a reframe. Can't run because I've got dodgy hips through too many years of exercising. So I took up road cycling. Went from zero, never ridden a bike for 40 years to 150 miles a week. Crazy, I know. And when I was out one day, I remember thinking, and this is back in June, July, when lockdown's over, I'm going to do this. When lockdown's over, I'm going to do this. When lockdown's over, I can see my clients, I can go on holiday, I can do all of these things. And I suddenly realised I had a bit of an epiphany. But what am I going to do right now? Because today is all I've got. I don't have tomorrow. Yesterday's gone. Am I really going to, I'm not getting any younger. Am I really going to put my life on hold now until some mystical date in the future? No, I've got to look, and this is a reframe. What can I look for today that makes me happy? Because this is your life right now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. Now, it's great to look forward to things. Absolutely, we need that. But we also need to look at what we can be happy for now, because I always have said to clients, even before the pandemic, avoid putting things off into the future, because I'd hear people say, I'll be happy when I get married, I get divorced, I have another child, I have a child, I get a new house, new car, new handbag, new kitchen, new bathroom, new job. When we keep putting our happiness off into the future, it conditions the nervous system to believe that happiness is always only ever going to be in the future. So when you actually get the thing you've been craving or think will make you happy, does it? Not for very long, because you've conditioned yourself to believe it's in the future. So my challenge to you guys is to find something, even if it's only for 10 minutes a day, to make you happy now. And those of you who say, oh, I haven't got time for that, don't be ridiculous. You're the ones that need it the most, because behavior breeds behavior. If you're in a bad mood, out of control, not managing things well, you're affecting or infecting everyone around you with that. So actually you can't afford not to take 10 minutes out, whether it's your walk, whether it's a bath, whether it's reading a book, whether it's 10 minutes yoga, whatever it happens to be for you. Critical. We can't always choose what happens to us, but we can always choose how to respond. So 10-minute challenge, go and find yourself something that can make you happy. So well-being. Okay, what can you do to boost your well-being? Have a healthy diet. I'm not going to go into colour on your plate and all that. You know what you should be having. But what I will do is give you why you might be, first of all, I'll tell you why you might be comfort eating. Back at the very beginning, I said we had a need as humans for certainty. Back to our caveman times, one of the quickest ways for us to get certainty was to eat something, because our brains are designed to keep us away from pain and alive long enough to procreate. That's still the fundamental driver for our animal brains. So on that most fundamental level, as soon as you eat something, your brain, your subconscious knows that's okay, I'm going to be all right for the next few days. We haven't evolved enough yet to realise that for most of us, I realise it's not everyone, but for most of us, we're lucky enough to have full fridges. So our brains go, when you're feeling uncertain or stressed or anxious, eat, eat. You eat, you feel better. Not for long though, because it triggers it again every time you start feeling stressed. Some people just want to tell them that is enough for them to be able to go, I'm not going to have that snack because I know what I'm doing. It's just my brain trying to get some comfort. So that's the one thing, that's the comfort eating. That's why we comfort eat. The second is binge eating. Again, that goes back to our caveman times. Originally, we were nomads. I'm sure you know, we were hunter-gatherers. And the only time we ever ate anything sweet was when we came across a tree or a bush with fruit. Now, we were off again pretty soon. We never stayed anywhere for very long. Fruit is perishable and it doesn't last even if we did stay. There's only seasons, isn't there? So what we tried to do was cram as much into our mouths as possible. Again, that's another one of those DNA throwbacks that we still do now. It comforts us, it makes us feel good. Now, a lot of people are overeating actually because they're thirsty. So I would say make sure you're drinking enough water, because we have to get the message from the stomach to the brain. So watch your water intake. Our brains are made up of 73 to 75% water. If you're not taking on enough water, just 2% is going to make a difference to your cognitive ability. Next, exercise. I think I've done that. I'm not going to go through that again because we're running out of time. Make it a priority though, critical. I did say I'd talk about sleep. If you're struggling to get to sleep, it's typically because your sleep patterns changed since lockdown. You may be not getting up and going to work at the same time. So you're going to bed at the same time, but you're waking up later. Your body only needs so much sleep. To regulate it, go to bed and get up at the same time every day for 2 weeks. When you do that, it will reset your clock. That's even at weekends as well, guys. You need to do it consistently for 2 weeks. Also, lots of work done around light. Avoid phones, and if you've got kids, this is important as well. Phones, laptops, iPads, avoid those at least half an hour before going to bed, because what that's doing is interrupting your circadian rhythm, because your brain thinks when it sees that bright light that it's daylight and stops your serotonin production. So really important to stop using any electronic equipment at least half an hour before bed. Next, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, if this is you, what happens is we fall asleep, we go into REM, rapid eye movement sleep, down into deep sleep, back to REM sleep, back up nearer consciousness. We have 5 of those sleep cycles a night. Each one of those is an hour and a half, so 90 minutes. What tends to happen is if your brain hasn't been able to process something, it will wake you up probably after the second or third sleep cycle in, so 3 o'clock or 4:30, depending what time you go to bed, but somewhere around that time. Worst thing you can do is turn the light on because it stops serotonin production. Worst thing you can do is reach for your phone as well, same thing. Because what will happen then, it'll be a whole hour and a half before you fall back to sleep again. So what I would suggest that you do is leave a pad and pen by the side of the bed, reach over, don't turn the light on, don't pick up your phone, scribble it down, put it back down, and you should fall back to sleep. Typically, you'll only need to do that 2 or 3 nights, and that will be that. You won't wake up like that again. Okay, moving on very swiftly, because I'm going to realise we're going a little bit over time. Avoid obsessively watching the news. Only bad news sells. Loads of research on this. It actually really is very detrimental to our mental health by having the news on 24/7 as a background, because you might not be listening to it consciously, but your subconscious is. Gives you a very skewed view of the world and is now being proven to cause depression and mental health problems. So if you know you're prone to watching a bit too much news, now is time to do a bit of a news fast. You don't need it. Keep up to date with the headlines. That's all you need. Limit your social media exposure. There's lots of evidence that that causes depression and anxiety as well, because we're trying to compare ourselves to other people. People only post what they want you to see. Avoid gossiping and negativity. Try and keep things light and avoid doom mongers. If your family are maybe doom mongers or the people that you work with, set some boundaries. Set some boundaries about how much time you spend with them and the topics. Interestingly enough, the people who have the most to lose by you setting boundaries are the ones that will be most upset by them. Okay, so kind of brings me to the end. But what I want to do, I'm just going to run through a couple of quick other things. But if you can be thinking of any questions you've got for me and you can put them in the chat section, that would be ace. So just a couple of quick things. As I've said, I do a lot of coaching, exec coaching and coaching with people at most levels. I'm really about getting people to think and behave differently, as you can see, using these kinds of techniques and tools. I work with a whole range of different topics. There isn't anything that's out of bounds. I tend to work with the person as a whole, so very integrated. It isn't just about what's going on in work, it's about what's going on in work, at home, and everything in between. So I do an awful lot of coaching, especially at the moment where people's mindsets are probably not great. I do corporate training as well, as I've already mentioned. I do lots around outplacement. As I've said, that's starting to pick up again now, as you would imagine. So job hunting, interview skills, CV writing, that kind of thing. I also do resilience, emotional intelligence, leadership development, managing teams, managing remote teams, lots of different corporate training. I also have some online training now as well. So if you like this, I actually have a full building resilience course available. And what I'll do is after this session, I'll send you an email with all of this detail on so you don't have to remember it all. I've also got some books. 100 Motivational Moments. You might have seen me dropping a new motivational moment every day at the moment. So I think I've done about 38 or 39 of them now. So that's just literally just one page each for each moment, just to give you a quick insight and a bit of a pep up whenever you need it the most. There's some self-care tips at the end as well. I've also got Thoughts Become Things, which was my first book, and Your Dream Job, which I'm just actually about to republish in the next quarter or so. So that brings me to the end. If you want to follow me on social media, if you don't already, that would be ace. At the moment, I am dropping every single one of the 100 motivational moments in 2 different formats, plus lots of other free stuff. So please feel free to follow me on that. Guys, I think that's pretty much me. I know I've run over by 5 minutes, but I'm sure you didn't mind. I'd rather give you all the content. But my kind of question to you now is, what are you going to do differently? You've taken the time out to come on this session. What are you going to do differently as a result of it? Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. You can change, but you have to do something different. So I'm going to flip the screen, and if you've got any questions for me, that would be brilliant. So, oh, got some hearts there. Thank you. Thanks for that, Jan. That's brilliant. Thank you. Oh, here we go. When you try to change your thoughts, how long do you need to do it before it comes? Immediately. It's immediate. So as soon as you notice, because I said the hardest part is actually recognizing that you're having a negative thought. As soon as you recognize it, literally think about something else not related to the negative thought, and you'll immediately change. You cannot have two thoughts at once. Now, if you're asking how long will it take before I just do it automatically, well, that's how long is a piece of string, because I think when you start to train yourself to think more positive and be more positive, those negative thoughts come less frequently. But research has shown that you can't actually stop the negative thoughts, but you can change them. You do have full control over changing them when they come. So hope that makes sense. When you change your thoughts, how long do you need to do it before it becomes second nature? I hope that's answered it for you, Pauline. It's like I said, I've been doing this stuff 23 years now, and I still have to manage my thoughts. You know, I did this morning when I kind of recognized I was replaying something. So as I said, this stuff you have to do a little bit every day. Bit like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym once and you're fit for the rest of your life. This is a choice, and it isn't hard, because people go, oh, it's work, oh, it's too hard. No, you've just got to remember to do it. So leaving prompts for yourself. One of my clients asked yesterday, how do I do that, Joe? Leave yourself little prompts. Leave yourself little stickies or whatever, little reminders on your phone, whatever you need to do. Hope that answers that one for you, Pauline. Nick, do you feel it's best to introduce changes in small steps or wholesale? I would probably say what I do when I'm doing the 2-hour webinar of this is I've got one here. I have a very comprehensive workbook with it, which has step-by-step instructions for everything that I describe. What I say to people is just take one thing, one or two things, because people struggle just to pick one thing out. Take at least one thing and keep practicing it. Now, a lot of people think there are days bandied around about how long it takes to create a habit. It's not actually how many days, because some people say 21, some people say 66, some people say 100. It's not actually the days, it's the amount of times you do something. The more times you do it, the deeper the neural pathway becomes. So in answer to your question, Nick, I would take one or two things out of today and implement it for the next 21 days as much as you can. So just focus on whatever was your biggest takeaway from today and focus on that for the next 21 days. Then have a flip back. You can either get my book or you can have a flip back through everything I've been putting social media and, on LinkedIn or wherever, because all of my videos are on there. And just pick something else, because what will happen now is something will have resonated with you depending on where you are in your journey, in your life, and what's going on around you. Those same things might not be the same in 21 days. So that's what I say on my 2-hour webinar. Take a couple of things, implement it for the next 21 days, then go back to the content and see if there's anything else that resonates. So I hope that answers that one. Jan, thank you, little star. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you for the positivity. You're very welcome, Sam. Do I think anchoring can help with negative thoughts? Anchoring tips. Yeah, I mean, there's a big one that we use in NLP for anchoring is to hold, when you're feeling strong positive emotions, anchor your middle finger and your thumb together as you're feeling it. The more positive that feeling is, the harder you hold your fingers together, so that when you come up against a negative situation, if you hold your fingers together, hopefully you will trigger that same anchoring. And as well, we can anchor negative things then. So if you've been consistently worrying, and you're doing it in one particular chair, what will happen is, even if you're in a relatively good mood, as soon as you sit down in that chair, you've anchored that negativity to that place. So if you know you have a worry chair get up, move, go, start sitting somewhere else. So anchoring can be a really good thing. Anchoring in terms of, if you want to start really thinking positively, what I would suggest is find somewhere that you like to sit, that feels comfortable, not where you typically do your worrying, and do some visualization. Imagine your future, how you want it to be. Imagine things going really perfectly, because the mind cannot tell the difference between that real thing and that imagined thing. So you'll be anchoring it in positive vibes to where you're sitting. You'll obviously also make yourself feel better. I wish I'd have had time to go through everything. Visualization is a massive tool that's really, really helpful. So I hope that answered that for you, Nick. Do you think it's best to wake up naturally? Okay, definitely naturally. Or if you can't do that, find a better way than to wake you up, because what that does, that alarm naturally triggers off your stress response. Now, who wants to wake up with the stress response? Because that alert is it sets up our panic response. So if you have to set an alarm, do one that has a nice kind of harp or some tweeting birds or something like that, or even leave your curtains open. What will naturally happen then is you'll typically wake up with the daylight. The other thing that I suggest to people is literally say to yourself, I want to wake up at 6 o'clock, and I will, or whatever time it is, I will guarantee you'll wake up at least just 1 minute before, because your circadian rhythm knows and your brain subconscious knows, and it will wake you up. So yeah, it's not great to wake up with an alarm. If you can avoid it, great. As I say, now we're getting lighter mornings. If you keep your blinds open or your curtains open, you'll naturally wake up with it. Thank you. Reboot. Perfect. Great session. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Nick. Guys, if there's nothing else, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm bob on time as well. And thank you for interacting with me. What I will do after the session today, I'll send you a quick email out with some information about some of the stuff that I've been discussing, and some links and things if you want to look at this stuff in a bit more detail. If your business or you would like me into your business to either do some coaching or do some leadership development or training, the details will all be in there as well. But guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and it's weekend nearly. Thank you, guys. See you all. Take care. Thank you.